Hi, Educator Barnes here, and today this video is a response to an article I wrote recently. I think it's been about a week now, called Why This Black Teacher Quit Brownsburg Community School Corporation. As of this recording, it is the most viewed piece on NDK12 for 2020, uh, which is a bit I don't want to say shocking to me when you think about our current political climate and the civil unrest we have seen lately due to the death of George Floyd by the hands of the police. Since then, during this pandemic, a lot of people are starting to look at our society and our community and say, this is enough. This is unacceptable. We can no longer tolerate this. And that makes me hopeful, but we still have a lot of work to do. This school year, I completed my 14th year as an educator, and I haven't ever written about this directly. And let me tell you why. I've written about it, but I've never dropped the name of the school district. Some of the components of this piece, some people who have read my work for a while said, you wrote about that before, but you never said where. But I was watching the news and I came across a story about a couple of young girls who attend school in Brownsburg. And they talked about the racism they have faced, talked about being called the N word, talked about students making fun of them, talked about students saying that they needed to go back to Africa. And that really burned me up on the inside. And they were demanding change. They wanted something to be different because there's no reason to re-traumatize yourself, because that's what happens many times when people share these stories. They re-traumatize themselves. There's no reason to re-traumatize yourself if you don't think or if you don't hope that change will come. And my fear is that when we return to whatever normal looks like and we don't have all the time on our hands, that a lot of us will just go back to the status quo and ignore some of the stuff that's happening. And my whole career, I've been motivated by students. I do what I do because I love teaching students. I love engaging them intellectually, and I love to be a part of their journey of growing up and becoming a great citizen. So when I saw those two Black students speak up, I said, now I can speak up. Now I'm going to share my story. Because when I tried to share some of the things that happened to me, like when they were happening, I pretty much got shut down. So that not only affected how I felt during the time, it affected me during my entire career, even currently during this career. I recently wrote another piece that has been viewed quite a bit about how I felt emotionally unsafe when my school decided to start having diversity, inclusion, and equity talks. And currently, I'm a school administrator. And I talked about the fact that I had to sit there in a meeting with people, some of who had done things to me this school year. In that piece, I wrote about how I had a colleague who admitted to bullying and harassing me this school year. And because of my experience in Brownsburg and knowing that sometimes when you speak up, nothing happened, I just kept going about my business. Luckily, my principal has no tolerance for that type of stuff, and she dealt with it, and that person received consequences. And on top of that, I was moved to a different location in my building just to kind of give me a new, fresh start, which I greatly appreciate, because my experience in the past is like, well, you deal with it, you suck it up and you deal with it. But I'm at the point in my life, I will be 37 next year, that I'm like, enough is enough. I shouldn't have to deal with stuff like that. I shouldn't just have to take it. I shouldn't have to. And then you're asking someone to take it, but then you also want them to perform at this high level. And I just think that's just unacceptable. And so thinking about that, thinking about the fact that I've been writing since I think the first thing I've had published was by the Indianapolis Recorder. It is the first thing I've had published outside of me self-publishing myself, because anybody can blog, right? I wrote a piece that's called Why I Do This Work. If you don't know about the Indianapolis Recorder, it's the Black newspaper in Indianapolis, and it's the fourth oldest Black newspaper in the United States. So if you're not following them, follow that publication, because they really give you insight to the diversity in the Black community. And I mention that because you're going to hear my story and hear my response, but I'm not the only story. I'm not the only Black person that's ever worked in Brownsburg. So there'll be a variance of our experience. You may come across a Black educator that said they were fine, and you may come across those who said they aren't, and have already started to come across those people who responded to me privately, one publicly, one actually interesting, one person I know, like I don't know her that well, but I know her, right? I never knew she actually also worked in Brownsburg, and she publicly tweeted the piece and said that her spouse thought that she had written what I wrote. So at least with that, just coming across that and her spouse assuming that it was her and not me tells you that my story is not a singular story. However, there could be some diversity in the story. If you haven't seen the story yet, the story is on NDK12, and you can go to NDK12 by going to the website ND.education. I've been writing, NDK12 has been around since 2016. I've been a writer for the publication since 2017. And I want to tell you about our awesome writers. All of our writers are Black. Our team consists of Cheryl Kirk, David McGuire, Andrew Pillow, Keisha McIntyre, and yours truly, Shantae Barnes. One of the things I wasn't telling people, and this was more of a recent development, I'm now the editor-in-chief of the publication. One summer, I had an opportunity to sit down with Stephanie Wang. She is awesome journalist at Chocopee, Indiana. And just in kind of passing, I was quoted in something, and she said, we should have wrote writer and editor-in-chief. I'm like, and she said, no, if you're the editor-in-chief, you need to start saying that. And she didn't say it like me, like trying to like be aggressive, but I appreciated that. And since then, I've been naming that. For me, it's a work of heart, it's a behind the scenes thing. So I don't like to put myself out like that's me, but it is me. So I say that now. But if you go to Education and you scroll down, you will come across this piece where the little picture says I quit, and you can read about it. And actually, I was posted on June 27, 2020. So you can read more about that there. But when I think about this piece, there's been so many responses. I've had people, if they're already following me on Twitter, they have DM'd me. I've had people that have followed me for a while, so they know how to use our website a little bit more. So they've gone and clicked on my name, which links to my personal website. They've sent me a message on my contact form. I recently got on Facebook. I've always had a website, but I got on Facebook during the pandemic to share resources that way. So some people have messaged me through that page. The emails, the messages on LinkedIn, comments actually on the page, and it was just so much. Most people know if you write to me, I make a good, diligent effort to write back to people because I really like to engage with my readers. Because now, if you write, and this is just to any journalists or writers that are listening, engage with the people who read your work. They don't have to do that. And a lot of times they'll push back. Maybe you missed a perspective. I get a lot of ideas just engaging with my readers. So if you are a writer, please do that. But when I started looking at some of the comments, I got a little scared and worried because I felt like people were missing what I was saying. I didn't take, and it took me days to write this. Sometimes I can sit down and write something in one sitting. This took me days because I had to sit down and think about all the bad things that happened to me right when I came out of college. When I came out of college, my husband graduated a year before I did at Purdue. That's where we met. I came out of college, I got married. I had a job like in my field because my husband, when he graduated, he did not have a job in his field. He didn't get his job in his field until right before we got married. So he worked a whole year doing 2 jobs because he told my dad, he's like, she's going to be taken care of. So my husband was like, I'm going to do this. I'm going to be making income. So your father doesn't think I lied to him. So he did all the things. And so I'm like, if I sat down here and essentially re-traumatized myself, and I only put a fraction, people who are very close to me know I only put a fraction in this story. And also, like, I wasn't trying to write a novel. but I feel like people are missing a point. So what I would like to do, I will respond to the rest of the comments and messages I received. I'm working on it because I also like run this publication, so I got some other things to do. But I will respond. But I wanted to give some recommendations of my expectations. If you're really burned up about it, if you really want something to be done about it, I want you to do something. So here's my first recommendation. Work on yourself. I've heard a lot of people like, I'm enraged, I'm angry, I hope that you're okay. And there are some people that are wondering if I'm still an educator. I am. After I left Brownsburg, I continued teaching middle school English. I also, that next year I taught middle school English. The year after that was middle school and high school. And then I went back to mostly middle school. So I did that for 8 or 9 years. Then I transitioned to being an elementary English language learner teacher. Then I was an elementary literacy coach. After that, I was a teacher and a coach. So I taught high school English half the day. The other part of the day, I coached the English department, but I also did PD for the social studies and science department. And that was really around literacy strategies. Then after that, I was an elementary librarian. And now currently I'm a middle school academic dean. In my particular position, I supervise English. Well, last school year, I supervised the English department, social studies department, half the electives department. Next school year, I'll be supervising the entire elective department and the English department. In my particular school, I work in an IPS innovation charter school. This is not the time to get into that debate. If you want to debate me on that, we can talk about that some other time. But in my particular role, my principal does not supervise any teachers. The academic deans do. And that's what I do. So I'm doing okay. So those of you that have been so worried about if I'm doing okay, I'm doing okay. I have pressed on. I currently possess 5 licenses and I've had a job in every single one. I'm currently in a doctoral program. I'm doing okay. So since I'm doing okay now and I'm pressing on despite how my career started, I want you to worry less about me and more about you. So work on yourself. A lot of people are just kind of in this outraged culture. This is horrible. We should do something. You join a fancy group, but I need you to do more than join a fancy group. I was told that my piece was shared in a group on Facebook, and I'm going to pull that up for you guys to see. It was shared in this group, the Brownsburg Mom for Racial Acceptance and Diversity. I see here there's 900 members currently of this moment. There's also one in Avon. For those of you that don't, there are people that follow me that don't live in Indiana. Brownsburg is a suburb off the west side of Indianapolis, and so is Avon, and they're like next door to each other. So I see there's 900 people in the Brownsburg group, and there's 143 people in the Avon group. And that is great. Like it's great to be in a group with other people and to talk about the issues, but I need you to do more than talk about the issues. I need you actually to go do something, just to say like, we need racial acceptance and we need diversity. I need you to work on yourself. That means come to grips with who you are as a person. Come to grips with why you moved to Brownsburg or maybe to Avon. Because a lot of times we don't want to have the conversation about, because if you talk about moving to the suburbs, right? Why does a person move to the suburbs? They feel like something about the city, and our city will be in Indianapolis. It's not safe. The schools aren't good. And I will be the first to say there are bad schools in Indianapolis, but I also will be the first to say there are some good schools in Indianapolis. I choose to live in Indianapolis. I was born in Jeffersonville, Indiana, but I was raised the majority of my life in Indianapolis, and that's where I attended school. And I wanted my children to attend school in Indianapolis just like I did. But the truth is, some people move to the suburbs because they want to be around people that look like them. They are white and they want to be in a white place. And if you can't come to some type of realization that may be why you chose to move away, you need to start there. You need to start by informing yourself. I know right now what's really popular is the White Fragility book. I haven't read it, don't plan to read it because that book's not written for me, but read something, do something. Currently, what I've been reading, because this is a continuous work. One of the things I've done for the last 3 years, I'm part of the IDOE, Cultural Competency Advisory Council. So that's at the state level. We're a diverse group of people with a diverse group of skill sets and background. And one of our jobs is to advise the IDOE, and granted, we advise, so we can't make them do anything, but we talk about equity, diversity, we give feedback. We actually talked to Dr. McCormick a few weeks ago and gave some feedback just about like the current climate, how do we address that moving forward. So that's what I do. So for me, even with me being in that work, I know I have to work on myself. I can't show up to those meetings and I'm not actively engaged in making sure I'm checking my biases, making sure I'm staying informed. I recently read The Fire Next Time by James Baldwin. Excellent book. I just love how that man crafts a sentence. The book opens up with, God gave Noah the rainbow sign, no more water, the fire next time. And then he closes the book. He goes back to the opening for the closing. I just love it. And I mentioned that side note here. I love literature. And one of the things I pushed back against in Brownsburg, which I got in trouble for, was the fact that students need to read more than dead white authors. A lot of our curriculum is based on the colonizers, the white man's perspective, and is based on dead white people. And granted, I love me some dead white authors. I love Shakespeare, I love Edgar Allan Poe, and I love Charles Dickens. Those are three of my favorite dead white people, right? Love them, read them. Kids know it. Telltale Heart. It's like one of my stories. I like to debate whether the narrator is male or female. That's a whole conversation. Oh, and it's interesting. But anyway, I love that. So it wasn't like I was removing everything, but what I was doing, I was adding stuff to the curriculum. And so you don't always have to stick, because classics text a lot of times is synonymous with dead white folks. And I like to push back against that narrative. So I read that book. I'm currently reading, So You Want to Talk About Race. I am in chapter 2. And I also suggest that would be a better book to read, even though I haven't read White Fragility, because I like how she opens up the book with, so is it really about race? Spoiler alert, yeah, it is. The next chapter, she defines what racism is. And I like how she talks about, like, we can realize, most of us can agree the N-word is racist, right? But what about other things? What if a Black person says it's racist, but you don't think it's racist? She talks about all that stuff. So work on yourself first, because you cannot be engaged in this work if you're not working on yourself. You got to do that. Let's go to my second recommendation. Second recommendation is have conversations with your family and then your neighbors. Let's think about this. I got involved with even telling my story by listening to those Black students. They said that other students at the school was calling them the N-word or telling them to go back to Africa, right? Those students could be in your home. Those students are in your community. What conversations are being had with those children? Because if they're not being addressed by the school, they need to be held accountable by their parents or by people in the community. So after you start working on yourself, you need to have conversation with your children. I would start with, have you said things that have been offensive? And first off, side note, I understand that everyone doesn't have the greatest relationship with their children. So maybe you have to start with building a better relationship with your child to even be able to have that conversation. So that may be your action step right now, that you have to get a better relationship because you can't even talk to your child. So if you have to step away from the work to do that, because that's super important. Ask them, have they said things? Then maybe you're like, Shantae, my kids aren't racist. They don't discriminate. So ask them if they're one of those bystanders. So in the state of Indiana, students and staff, it's mandatory every single year that we do bullying training. And in that training, we talk about the bystander. The bystander is the person that sees things that are happening and does absolutely nothing. Things thrive, racism thrives because of people who do nothing. Are your children people who do nothing? Do they see racism? Do they see harassment? Do they see bullying? Do they hear comments that are inappropriate and say nothing? They say nothing to the students who are saying it. They say nothing to the teachers. They say nothing to you. And we know what peer pressure, most of my career, I worked in middle school, and I love middle school. It's like my favorite place to be. And I worked at elementary, middle, and high school. So I have all types of opinions of all this stuff. But middle school, that peer pressure is real. And what you'll see by bystanders, sometimes they inside, like they know it's wrong, but in middle school, it's like that awkward phase you're trying to fit in. So you may just go along to get along. You may even laugh and joke about it, but know it's wrong. I've had students who told me that they've seen something, but then they also admitted that they laughed because they didn't want to be called a nerd or a name or be called lame or whatever it is that kids are saying, because they always tell me that I'm always out of touch with the saying or I use it incorrectly. So whatever it is, they get called. So start there, because remember what I said in the last recommendation. There are people who moved out there because they wanted to be in a white environment and they want to keep it white. So if you want to keep your environment white and you feel like it's being threatened, then you may be saying things which gets internalized by children and they go out and do things. So do that. Recommendation 3, I kind of already talked about. Speak up when you hear something. One of the most common comments I received was, I heard there was racism in Brownsburg. I mean, well, I saw this and it seemed to be racist. What did you do? I mean, telling me that you think Brownsburg is a little bit racist, or telling me that I saw something racist and you haven't spoke up about it, what purpose does that serve? Like, really, what purpose does that serve? It serves no purpose if you're actually not doing anything. Part of the reason when I was invited to be on the IDOE Cultural Competency Advisory Council, I felt like that was a way that I could do something, right? Because I've seen, there hasn't been a school I've worked in where I haven't seen some type of equity issue. Some schools are much better than others about addressing equity issues. Like, I'll shout out my previous principal, Dr. Denisha Murph. She's a principal of Westlake Elementary. She is very intentional about hiring a diverse staff. And I will tell you, because I worked there for a year, that some people weren't feeling that. And there were people, just like I said in my piece, that feel like she's just hiring Black folks. No. There's not a Black person in that building that can't do their job, because she hiring people that are Black and excellent. And that's the other thing that we have to push back against, that narrative that affirmative action means we're just hiring Black folks. I just can't show up and not be able to do my job. I think if I want to interview for my current job, like I actually interviewed mid-career. This is when I was like, well, maybe I should go back to the suburbs. I interviewed at Carmel High School. I actually was out for the job. I turned it down. And I actually turned down the job in Carmel to go work in Washington Township, where I currently live, because like, who doesn't want to work in the community where they live? And the principal, John Williams at the time, he says to me, like, you're a weird person. Like, he says this to me in the interview. He said, like, your resume is just kind of like, it's like, one of the things that he found that was odd, it was on my resume, says that I had perfect attendance in high school. I had an academic honors diploma. He just said there was just a lot of stuff. And so there's a saying where people say that Black people have to work twice as hard to get half as much. I try to fight against that narrative, but the truth is, I know that my resume looks crazy. I know I have a whole bunch of stuff on there that people that I work with they'll never get to. And that's just not me trying to put them down. That's the truth. They'll say things like, I got my bachelor's, I'm good, I don't need no other training. I feel like I have to be a lifetime learner. And so for me, I want to be a lifetime learner. I want to be making an impact. And I'm on that committee so I can learn, and also so I can bring back knowledge to help stuff. Or help situations when I see something that's not appropriate. Recommendation number 4, push back on hiring practices, curricula, responses to racism, bullying, and harassment. Hiring practices. Multiple times during my career, not just in Brownsburg, I've been referred to as an affirmative action hire, because what has happened is the school district's like, we're going to hire more diverse people. But they don't address the fact that there are teachers that hate the concept of affirmative action. They don't like that the school is trying to intentionally diversify. And so in their hearts, they truly feel like, I got hired because I was Black. That was the only thing I had to do, was be born Black, and I got the job. Don't mind you that, at this point in my career, I have a bachelor's, I have a master's, I have 5 licenses. I've had a job in every single one of them. I've gotten some awards, right? Done all the things, but no matter that, you're just trying to get more Black people in here. She probably can't teach. So not only when school districts are trying to diversify, they need to have a real conversation with the district, like the staff, to say, this is what we're doing, this is why, and this is what we're looking for. We're not just looking for a Black people. We're looking for Black people or Latinx people or Asian people who are also talented, who are also great in their content area. And I push back against it. I'm in a position now where I can interview people. And I've interviewed people who look like me. And there are people that look like me that I did not offer a job to, because the education of my students is too important for me just to hire you because you look like me. You have to come with the knowledge. I have to be confident in knowing that you're going to teach and you're going to teach well. The curricula, push back on what your students are learning. When I was at Purdue, we took these multicultural classes, which were great. I think at this point in time, we are going to say that we're shifting away from multicultural education. There's nothing wrong with multicultural education, right? There's nothing wrong with learning about the whole around the world. Cultural responsiveness, however, is responding to the different cultures you have in your school. For example, when I was elementary librarian, there are Nigerian students in the school. One of the things I looked for was like, how many books here do we have that reflects Nigeria? We didn't have, I think we had one, and it was one of, if you know anything about libraries, you'll have these different companies you can buy books for, and they make, some of these companies make books just for the library, right? So it was one of those like standard, like Nigeria, and like, here's some facts about Nigeria. No, and it was like some throwback old photos. There was nothing of like Nigeria today, right? So for me, I wanted to find books, and I ordered some graphic novels. And some of it I couldn't find stuff that was particular Nigerian, but I also noticed we really didn't have anything that was really just Africa. And besides learning about where Africa was, so I intentionally purchased some books. I purchased some graphic novels where the characters were in Africa, right? Because as much as I love Greek mythology, I had a Greek mythology club at one of my schools. Loved it. But I also had an African American literature club. And people always said, that's an odd combination. I'm like, no. The students wanted Greek mythology. I love Greek mythology. Had it. Students wanted to read about African American literature. Had it. And I will tell you about that African American literature club I had. That group was diverse. It wasn't just Black kids. I had Black kids, Latinx students, and white students in that club. So it was a really awesome time. Oh, I miss doing clubs. So push back on that, and not just in the English classroom, push back on social studies. Andrew Pillow, one of the writers of NDK12, did a great job of writing about how world history really isn't world history, and about how social studies curricula needs to be addressed. So how is history being taught? Is it only being taught by the colonizer perspective? That's why it was important. I wrote in my piece about Thanksgiving, how we looked at how indigenous people see Thanksgiving as a day of mourning. And I talked about like the narrative of the Pilgrims and the first Thanksgiving versus what indigenous people say and what indigenous people feel. There's a book I read recently, the Indigenous People's History. A great book. It's thick. It's a thick book, but there's a whole section where they talk about Indiana and things I learned about Indiana I had never learned about. Because in fourth grade and good on Indiana, that's when we do that Indiana history. Yeah, it's not very good. So reads some other books, and then push back on how Brownsburg Community School Corporation is responding to racism, bullying, and harassment. Are they just brushing it off? Do the students get real consequences? Because if they don't, and the students have to continue to deal with this, then nothing's going to change. Recommendation number 5 is to demand, it's kind of times before, demand the district craft a plan to address issues and evaluate its effectiveness over time. There's nothing like having a plan that nobody evaluates, right? So when you're pushing back, say, well, these are the things I want to see in the plan. I want to see your plan on how you're going to address. And I also would say with our anti-bullying training, we can incorporate racism into that, because when students are racist and they do it over a period of time, because we know bullying is not, because we all know, if you're an educator watching, you all know, Mrs. Barnes, I'm being bullied. Okay, what happened? Well, they called me a bad name. Did they call you a bad name before? No, just today. Have you ever had a problem with a student? Nope, that's not bullying. That's just somebody being mean, right? So we know that bullying is multiple incidents over a period of time, right? So if I'm being racist to a classmate over a period of time, that's racism and bullying. So one of my recommendations is to make sure that is incorporated into our anti-bullying training. But make sure that plan address hiring practices, address curricula, it address responses to it, informing students about it. And then they have metrics to evaluate how effective this plan was. Are the reports of racism, bullying, harassment, or reports about things not being equitable, is that decreasing because of this plan? Or is it staying the same, or is it increasing, right? And some people are like, well, when you start measuring that stuff, the numbers are going to be high. Well, hell, you got to start somewhere, right? And we all know we're data driven. So if you don't have data on it, you're going to have to get you a baseline and start somewhere. So that, and once again, when I tell you, when you start having these conversations, people start pushing back. That's how they push back. Well, we don't have data. I mean, it's not clear if it's an issue here. How many stories do you need? I assert you only need one. If you have one child that's not having a good education because they're being harassed, that's one too many, and you should do something. You shouldn't be telling us all the ways that you can't do something. You should be telling us how you're going to address it. So when they start saying that, because I've been in enough diversity, equity, and inclusion conversations to know that's where these conversations typically go. When people are saying that, you people in Brownsburg, you got to push back. Next recommendation, leverage the PTO, right? What can you do as a PTO? One of the things that you may hear, which I will say is a legitimate pushback, right? We don't have the funds to address it. I mean, yeah, we want, let's say they say something like, we want all the teachers to read, so you want to talk about race. But we don't have the funds set aside to purchase novels for everyone, so we can't do that, right? That's a legitimate concern. I talk about a lot that I mean, right now, if you ask me, do I think I'm being paid the salary that I should be paid? No, I'm not. If you ask me, have there been points in my career where I felt based on what I was doing, I was being paid decently? I would say, right now, I would say no. When I was in Brownsburg, I would say no. But again, it didn't matter because even now, my husband and I decided that our lifestyle would be based on one salary. So if something ever happened to either one of us, we could still survive. That's kind of our whole financial thing. And if you're curious about that, we follow the D-Free Lifestyle by Dr. DeForest Stories. You can look it up, mydfree.org. I believe it's .org. If it's not .org, try .com. All about that. And for Black people that are listening, it really taps into a lot of the Black perspective and the Black perspective about why sometimes we have a hard time getting ahead, outside of systemic racism. But during the PTO, one of the things that PTO, like at my son's school, they raise capital. They raise money, right? And I know at my son's school, they fund things, right? They may fund projects in teachers' classes. So think about how the PTO can help support the district do the work. When the district comes back and say, well, we can't do that. Think about how you can say, well, yeah, us parents, we can take care of that, right? We can go fundraise. We can go get those books. We can go have the conversation. We can go poll the parents. We can ask them to talk to their students to get feedback. Figure out how you can partner with the district to address this particular need, right? There's a lot of great things that PTOs do, but I'm asserting that this is probably going to be one of your more important things that you need to do moving forward. Next point, number 7, is get involved with the school board. If you're watching this right now, and I don't really care if you live in Brownsburg or not, have you ever been to a school board meeting? I can say I have. I've been to quite a few, and they're interesting. Now, can it be dry and boring sometimes? Yeah. And are they at inconvenient times? Yes. There's an article for Chalkbeat, Indiana, I think it's from 2017, but I'm like in the picture and I'm on like the front row, and I have twin sons, they're 9. I have one across my lap. I have one sitting beside me. At that meeting, my kid was playing with Legos, and the Lego just popped out of his hand. And to me, it felt like this was slow motion. And then, of course, to me, and probably I was just mortified that this happened. I felt like it just got silent. You could just hear the Lego go pop, 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 pop. Then I'm like, go get it. And after that, I just threw it across my lap because I was just embarrassed. And I was sitting on the front row, right? And I was actually there at that particular meeting in my capacity as a writer at NDK12 because I ended up writing about some of the topics that were discussed at that IPS board meeting. But go to the school board meetings because that's, I love Hamilton. I love musicals. That's the room where it happens, right? That's where they approve things or deny things. And you need to know who is on your school board. Do you know who's on your school board? I recently wrote a piece about knowing who's on your school board. If you don't even know who's on your school board, that's problematic. And here, some of you can do a little bit more. If there's people you know who's on your school board, you're not pleased with the things that they are valuing, right? Because the school board is supposed to represent you. And right now you're saying this racial acceptance, this diversity, this inclusion is important, and you don't feel the school board is pushing the school district to do something about it, then take their seat, run against them and unseat them. Like, you can do that. Or you can push back and make it too uncomfortable for them to sit on the school board and not address it. But get involved. Typically, you can go to a website. If you can't go to me, you can read the notes. I read a lot of school board notes. That's typically as in my capacity as a writer, because I write things based on what's happening in school boards. And for me, I worry about Washington Township the most because that's where my kids go to school. But I also look at different districts. So figure out some districts put video out there of the school board meetings, and some put the audio out there. But get involved. Maybe you can't go to all. Like, I don't go to every single school board meeting. I just don't have the time, and I work in a school, so sometimes the meeting is happening where I need to be at my school, or homework, right? Dinner, right? There's other things that I'm doing. It's not a good time, but try to be involved at some level. So my challenge today is, if you don't know who's on the school board, find out. If you don't know when the school board meetings happen, find out, and then commit to going to at least one. Start somewhere, right? And number 8. Determine your plan of action and the timeline. So I've given you 7 recommendations, but my 8th recommendation is make a plan. When you cut off this video, like, write down what you're actually going to do. So maybe let's say you're already been working on yourself, right? Shantae, I got books. I've been working on myself. I've been having conversations. I've been going to the book study. I've been changing my actions. When I see a Black person, I'm not crossing the street. I'm just going to keep walking. Like, I'm taking some meaningful actions, right? I'm doing I see something. I'm saying something. I'm doing all that. Shantae, I'm good. Figure out what you need to do and make a plan of action. Then what's your timeline, right? So you may say, by first semester, I'm going to attend 2 school board meetings. You may say, by the end of the summer, I'm going to call the PTO president at my school and talk to him about some of the things I want the PTO to do this year. It may be, I want to be involved in one event. It may be, I'm going to once a month have a conversation with my children about things they're seeing in school and what we can do about it. It could be, I'm going to fight for the curriculum, because everybody can't fight for everything, right? We all have our lives. We all have a certain level of bandwidth, right? Figure out what it is you're going to do, and then make a commitment to when you're going to do it, right? And part of timelines, I make goals for myself all the time. Then when am I going to come back and reevaluate this, right? So those are my recommendations and my responses. And I hope these things are helpful for you, because for me, I appreciate everything that's been said to me. I truly do. But if all you do is feel bad for me for what happened, or feel bad for the Black students that spoke up, and you do absolutely nothing, then your apologies and you feeling sorry doesn't mean anything, right? Because that means the environment is an environment where racism can continue to thrive. I will say that one of my favorite comments came yesterday, and I wanted to share this with you guys. Yesterday morning, and for NDK12, I get notifications when people write comments. And my favorite comment was by John. And I've started to respond to the comments. John, it says, Mrs. Barnes, I was a student of yours at BWMS. I never could tell you were frustrated. You were a great English teacher. I enjoy my time as your student. I'm sorry the administration treated you this way. I'm also sorry they hired you to meet a diversity demand as opposed to hiring you and recognizing your talent as an English teacher. I hope all is well with you and your family. Kindest regards, John Massingale. That really, really, really warmed my heart, because I know I made a difference, right? But it's another thing just to read it. And then he ended with kindest regards. One of the things I love teaching students is how to write a letter, and we talk about different ways to close it. And he said kindest regards. Oh, that's so sweet. So if you want to stay in contact with me or learn more, because remember I said this is not a one-time thing. Well, I need you to commit. I'll tell you some of the different ways that you can stay connected with me. First of all, you can follow my work at NDK12. You can go to our website was Education. You can follow us on Facebook. If you go to the search bar and put an NDK12, you should find our Facebook page. Like it, follow it. On Twitter, our handle is Indie Kids Winning. You can follow us there. You can follow my writing because I write a lot about diversity, equity, inclusion. I write a lot about literacy tips. I do tips for parents. I write from two perspectives. I write from the parent perspective and the educator perspective. I do all that. And now that I'm a school administrator, I sometimes throw it out there a little bit. The other way you can follow me, and I'll pull this up for you, is you can follow me on Facebook. During the pandemic, I found that my website, Educator Barnes, wasn't really effective of sharing the resources that I wanted to share with families. So I created this Facebook page like back in April. Here, I've been posting a lot of things for you to read. I posted some articles a while about because a lot of time we think about racism, we think about it between white and black. I posted a couple of articles about anti-Black racism from the Latinx community. I posted an article about anti-Black racism from the Asian community. But I post a lot of things here. I try to post a mix of resources, articles, book recommendations, and I try to post some positive, but I am a critical writer. So if that's a little too much for you, well, I'm just going to keep doing it, but that's what I do. So you can connect with me there, and that's facebook.com/Educator Barnes. So you could do that. The last way you could connect with me is on Twitter. And I'm actually going to close with my Twitter page. So let me pull my Twitter page up for you guys. I'm getting really good at this whole share screen thing. This is the first time I've actually used it in a recording like this. My Twitter handle is Educator Barnes, but I have a pinned tweet. This pinned tweet is from April 4th, 2018, and this was at the Kennedy King 50 event. If you don't know, there is a monument where Kennedy is reaching out to Dr. Martin Luther King, and Representative John Lewis came to speak. And at the time, I was working at Crispus Attucks High School, and we watched it because they live streamed it. And this is what Representative John Lewis said at this event, and this is my pinned tweet. He said, "When you see something that's not right, something that is not fair, something that is not just, you have a moral obligation to say something, to do something. You cannot be quiet." And those are the words I live by. And those are the words that I'm going to leave you with today. If you see something, say something, do something. It is, as Representative John Lewis said, your moral obligation. Thanks for listening. Until next time.